My name is Daniel. I'm 20 years old, and this happened during my second year in college. I never believed in ghost stories. Every time someone shared a creepy experience, I always assumed there was a logical explanation. Old buildings make strange noises. Shadows can play tricks on your eyes. Fear can convince you that you've seen something that was never there. After what happened that morning, I stopped looking for explanations. This happened in August during the middle of the rainy season. The weather forecast warned that a powerful storm would hit our city before sunrise. Around 5 in the morning, I woke to the sound of rain pounding against my bedroom window. The wind howled so loudly that it shook the roof of our house. I checked my phone several times, expecting a suspension announcement from the school. Nothing. My first class started at 7. Since I didn't want to be late, I grabbed my bag, put on my raincoat, and left. The streets were almost empty. Most stores were still closed. The traffic lights reflected off the flooded roads, making everything look strangely lifeless. As I got closer to campus, the rain became heavier. Dark clouds completely covered the sky. Even though it was almost 7 in the morning, it looked more like evening. When I arrived at the school gate, something immediately felt wrong. The gate was wide open. Usually, students crowded the entrance before class. That morning, there wasn't a single person. No students, no teachers, no security guards. Only the sound of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. I looked around, thinking I must have arrived unusually early. I checked my phone. 6:47 AM. I was only a little early. I shrugged and walked inside. The campus felt different. The silence wasn't peaceful. It felt heavy, almost as if the entire school was holding its breath. The hallways echoed with every footstep I took. The fluorescent lights flickered every few seconds. Some were completely off. Rainwater dripped from the ceiling into small puddles along the corridor. I called one of my classmates. No answer. I tried another. Straight to voicemail. The signal on my phone suddenly disappeared. No service. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and continued walking toward our classroom on the 3rd floor. As I reached the staircase, I heard slow footsteps somewhere above me. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and listened. The footsteps continued. Slow, steady, as if someone was climbing one floor above me. I looked up the stairwell, expecting to see another student. No one. The sound suddenly stopped. For a few seconds, the school became completely silent again. I forced myself to laugh. It's just the storm, I whispered. Trying to ignore the uneasy feeling, I continued climbing to the 3rd floor. Every step echoed through the empty building. When I reached the hallway, I immediately noticed that the lights were on. At the very end of the corridor, the door to room 307 was slightly open. A warm yellow light spilled into the dark hallway. Relieved, I smiled. Finally, someone else had made it to school. I walked toward the classroom and slowly pushed the door open. Every seat was occupied. My classmates were already inside. They all sat perfectly still with their heads lowered. Not a single person was talking. No one was looking at a phone. No one even acknowledged that I had entered. At the front of the room, Our professor stood with his back facing the class. He quietly wrote something on the blackboard. The sound of chalk scraping against the board echoed through the room. I smiled awkwardly. "Sorry I'm late, sir." The professor didn't answer. Neither did anyone else. Thinking they were taking a surprise quiz, I quietly walked toward my seat. As I passed the first row, something caught my attention. Every student's uniform was soaking wet. Water dripped from their sleeves onto the floor. Small puddles had formed beneath every chair, but the classroom itself was completely dry. Every window was closed. The ceiling wasn't leaking. There was no reason for anyone to be drenched. I looked at my best friend, Mark. His head remained lowered. Water slowly dripped from the tip of his hair onto his notebook. "Mark," he didn't respond. I gently touched his shoulder. His body was freezing cold. Not cold from the rain, cold like ice. Very slowly, he lifted his head. The moment Mark looked at me, my heart nearly stopped. His skin was pale. His lips were gray, and dark circles surrounded his eyes. He stared at me without blinking. Then he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It stretched too wide, as if his face had forgotten how a real smile should look. Without moving his lips, he whispered, "You're finally here." At that exact moment, the scratching of the chalk stopped. The professor slowly turned around and looked directly at me. "I'm glad you made it, Daniel," he said calmly. "We've been waiting for you." Every student in the room raised their heads at the same time. Every pair of lifeless eyes locked onto me. No one blinked. No one spoke. A flash of lightning lit up the classroom. For a split second, everything changed. The walls were black with burn marks. The ceiling was cracked. The desks were broken and covered in ash. The students' uniforms looked scorched, and their faces were covered in soot. When the lightning faded, the classroom looked normal again. The professor picked up an old attendance sheet. "Let's begin." He started calling names. One by one, each student answered, "Present." Every voice sounded cold and empty. Then I realized something. The names were familiar. I had seen them before on the memorial plaque near the school entrance. They belonged to students who died years ago. The professor reached the final name. He looked at me. "Daniel." Before I could answer, every student spoke together. "Present." The lights suddenly went out. The room fell into complete darkness. A freezing hand grabbed my shoulder. Someone whispered beside my ear, "You weren't supposed to survive." I screamed and ran. I pushed the classroom door open and sprinted down the hallway. Behind me, I heard dozens of footsteps following me at the same slow pace. I didn't dare look back. When I finally reached the first floor, I nearly collided with the school janitor. He stared at me in confusion. "What are you doing here?" I struggled to breathe. "The class. They're still upstairs." The old man's expression changed. "There are no classes today. The storm forced the school to suspend everything before sunrise." I shook my head. "Note, everyone is here." The janitor slowly pointed toward the third floor. "There hasn't been a classroom there for over 20 years. A lightning strike caused a fire there. 32 students and 1 teacher died. Then he opened a storage cabinet and handed me an old class photo. The same teacher, the same students, the same classroom. My hands started shaking. Standing in the back row was another student, soaked from the rain, looking directly at the camera. It was me. The photo had been taken 20 years before I was born. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I looked at the picture again, hoping I had mistaken someone else for myself. I hadn't. The face, the uniform I was wearing that morning, even the scar above my right eyebrow, everything matched. My hands began to shake. "There has to be a mistake," I whispered. The janitor slowly took the photograph from my hands. "I've worked at this school for 35 years, he said quietly. "I've seen this happen before." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "Every few years, during the worst storm of the rainy season, someone enters that classroom. They all tell the same story. They hear the attendance. They see the same teacher. And they always find themselves in this photograph." A cold feeling spread through my body. What happened to those people? The old man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the abandoned wing. Some transferred to another school. Some never spoke about it again. He paused before saying something I'll never forget. But a few disappeared during the next storm. Before I could ask another question, my phone suddenly vibrated. The signal had returned. There was only one notification. It was a message from an unknown number. "Attendance complete." I frowned. Then another message appeared. "See you next storm." I looked up from my phone. The janitor was gone. His mop was still leaning against the wall, but he had disappeared without making a sound. I searched the entire hallway. There was no sign of him. When I asked the school office about the old janitor the following week, the staff looked at each other in confusion. One of them opened an old employee record. The picture made my blood run cold. It was the same man I had spoken to. According to the file, he had died 5 years earlier after suffering a heart attack while working during a storm. I never went back to that building again. But every year, when the first strong storm arrives, my phone loses its signal at exactly 7:13 in the morning. A few seconds later, it vibrates. The sender is always unknown. The message is always the same. "You're late, Daniel. Everyone is waiting." If you've experienced something you still can't explain and would like your story featured in our next episode, send us a DM. Your true horror experience could be the next story we share.